Welcome to OutWithDan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to OutWithDan. Today I'm excited to talk to DM Rowell about her latest book, Silent Are the Dead. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, Dan. Great to see you.
Good to see you. I've waited a year to say welcome back. So welcome back.
And it's been way too long.
I agree. So give the audience an overview about Silent Are the Dead. What's it about?
So I'm going to hold it up for a sec.
Please.
Silent Are the Dead, which I absolutely look at that cover.
It's
My
gorgeous.
mom will not touch this book because of this cover. She took it off to read it.
I love it.
But Silent Are the Dead, as I started with Never Name the Dead, I'm doing a 4-day quest. So Silent Are the Dead picks up literally 10 minutes after Never Name the Dead ended. And it takes Mud and her cousin Denny on another adventure, solving murder and solving another crime in Kiowa country. I really love the concept of what I'm trying to do is give people a taste of introspection. You know, a 4-day quest is all about introspection, getting to know yourself. And as I'm trying to bring Mud through these mysteries, I'm also trying to give a taste of the Kiowa culture. And what I feel is important to everyone in the world is introspection, taking the time to know who you are, to sit in silence and think. We don't do enough of it.
I was about to say that scares the pants off of me, Donna. I don't want to sit around and think too much. But the truth of the matter is, when spirit or God, ever how you identify, when that entity talks to you, it's when you're silent. It's not when I'm talking. If I'm talking, I really can't hear spirit talk to me because I'm too busy.
Absolutely. And not only when you're talking, but when you're filling your head with visions and everybody else talking. You know, I love podcasts. I walk around doing my chores, listening to podcasts, OutWithDan being one of them. You always have my favorite authors.
Good.
But, you know, I always have to take that moment every morning of just starting my day in silence, just because you're right. I want the great spirit, the creator, to have time with me and me with the creator.
I agree. Most mornings I get up and I have my coffee. Some mornings I'll play a memory word game or whatever, but I do that. And I used to think, oh, well, look at me being silent. And then I remember I have to put down that memory word game because my mind is activated when I'm doing that. I played these things, hopefully to keep my mind active, but yet at the same time, it's in that stillness that we get a chance to hear our own nature speak to us. And we've talked about this before. I'm very spiritual in the fact that I believe I have a true connection with my spirit and with the universe, but it takes participation.
Yes.
Both participation and non-participation, you know, it's hard to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're describing it perfectly.
Thank you. So here's what I have to tell you. You frighten me because I don't know if I want to spend 24 hours with you, Donna. You put poor old Mud through a lot in 24 hours.
Well, I've got to keep her awake for 4 days. With just occasionally dozing off here and there.
So what brought you to this? Do a little bit about the 4-day introspection. Give us a little idea of what power is in that.
Typically in my culture, in the Kiowa culture, when you reach the age between 12 and 15, that's the time you want to start doing your first, what we call a vision quest. And it's just that. For me, my grandfather took me out we have a refuge essentially in our backyard in Oklahoma. And he'd take me out to the refuge. And he had spent literally a decade teaching me about wildlife and how to listen to what was going on around me. So when I say he took me out to the refuge and left me there, he didn't leave me unarmed.
Right.
I knew what to listen for. And to be honest, he was probably only 100 yards away, and I didn't realize that at the time. But what the goal was for me to take 4 days of introspection. And you drink water during that time, and you do sleep somewhat, but it's not the comfort sleep of your bed mattress. So you are stressing your body, and you're going to an extreme. And in that process, you find discoveries about yourself, and if you're lucky, I want to call it a vision, but it can also be a thought that just blossoms, and it starts giving you life direction. And that's what I'm trying to do with Mud, is I'm taking her through these 4 days. Sounds kind of strange, a spiritual quest with murders.
Well, one of the things that you weave in so well into both of these books is how nature, especially animals, participate in her discovery and her movement forward. It is animals feel something different than humans feel, but they communicate with us as well if we take the time to let them communicate with us. I'm especially interested in squirrels and birds. I know, so during the spring here where I live, I will have the sliding glass door open, and it's as if the birds have been sent simply to entertain me. And I'm just always amused at what you hear. You know when something's in distress because it lets you know. And I feel like that's something that you've certainly woven into both of your books.
I'm so glad you've caught that, because you're right. I think it's important to listen to all beings on the world. I dedicate every book to all my relatives, all my relations. And I do that because it's also the end of a Kiowa prayer, all my relations. And what it is we're sending out good, positive energy to everybody that walks, slithers,
Flies.
flies
Yes.
on Earth. And it's not just the human race. We're superior just because we have those thumbs. not because of brains and anything else, but we have to respect the animals and view them as all our relations.
I love that. And I think they are. And I think especially if we give them a chance. One of the things that I say to friends who may be in a bit of distress is I will say, while it sounds a little kooky, go out and hug a tree. And, I always get an eye roll or a snicker or whatever. And I'm saying, you would be surprised if you don't have to hug the tree, just go sit next to it. You'd be surprised at what nature will give you if you let it give you, because we live in a troubled world. This world ain't pretty most days. And we've all got a lot of stress coming from all different directions, whether it's home or work or politics or what have you. It is here. But what's not stressed is that tree, unless I go out and cut it down. That tree is a living organism that has energy, and it will freely give you that energy if you let it. And
absolutely true.
And
the animals living within it.
Yes. Yeah. And what we've done as a culture has tried to sort of erase and change history for Native Americans who were already into those customs long before people that looked like me got here to try to change the world. And I find that one of the things that you do is, rather than preach, you just simply share what's going on in your life, in your culture. And that, of course, makes it so much easier and much more fun to read.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate hearing that. Because you're right. I worry sometimes that I'm going too far, too deep into the culture or nature. But then at the same time, when I'm writing with a rhythm. I feel a rhythm as I write. And I let that rhythm drive the story. So I'm hoping that rhythm speaks to others.
It does. I'm an answer for everyone. Yes, it does.
Thank you.
So that brings up a question that I know is asked on a lot of podcasts, and a lot of authors are asked this question. Are you a big plotter, or are you more organic in your writing?
Definitely organic in my writing. I can't start until I actually see my murder or my crime. And then I just kind of go from that point. And I'll get to about chapter 7 and I'll see what my ending should be. And then I drive to that point. But I don't know what happens in between until I'm writing it.
I think that's perfectly fine. I find that when I write, a lot of times characters actually speak to me. All I have to do is hold my pen. Yes.
The first time that happened to me, the prologue in Never Name the Dead was done out of the character just came. I was doing a writing exercise. That wasn't originally the start of the book. And I wrote the book because of a creating writing course. Okay. And my teacher had forced me to restart the book 3 different times. And that was my next start. And I was a little frustrated. And I decided, well, I'm doing it from Grandpa's. And the character just, I had one character just kind of walk in, and he did it 3 times and he just took over. And that's one of the only chapters that had not even one word changed, because I let the character take over. Oh, once you have that feeling, there's no going back. You're hooked on it.
No. And once it comes to you, there's no going back and changing it. The only thing you can do is enhance it, clean it up, but the character has spoken. And I find that when the character speaks, then your work is done, so to speak. You become the scribe in this situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so funny to me, and people think I'm a little strange, but the characters create their own personalities. I might have a sense of who they are, but I will find that when I write my first draft, I'm just capturing the story that's coming to me. Then when I do the second draft, I realize I know this personality better now. Mm-hmm, and I can then enhance those different characters. But it's because I've gotten to know them, not from me imagining them, but from them putting their personality out there on that paper or screen.
Right. Precisely. Would you do both writing and documentary work? So yes.
I've been very fortunate. I've focused on my tribe for my documentary work.
I love that. It's a very good documentary too. It's very interesting.
Thank you. One of the things I want to try and do, hopefully, if I get book 3 and 4 out there, is I want to start putting those QR codes and possibly having them go in so that readers can hear an elder tell one of the stories from the tribe that I might have mentioned in the novel.
I like that.
That's my next goal. If I can get Crooked Lane to let me do book 3 and 4.
So I see we're going to have to do a letter writing campaign to Crooked Lane to make sure they know 3 and 4 are important.
Yes. If you want it, let's get it out there.
Absolutely. So in this book, Silent Are the Dead, fracking is in this book as well. So I sort of know what fracking is, but can you tell the audience what fracking is? I know you're probably not a fracking expert, but you have it in your book, so I know you've done research on it.
So fracking is a way that instead of drilling for oil and having this big oil spout come out, that they can look within the ground and see crevices of captured oil or gas. And so fracking actually forces water within the land itself. And that's how they're drilling. And that they're much more specific about where they go to grab that oil or gas that they're going after. And they're using the water in the area to do it. Legal fracking will capture and keep that poisoned water and export it and do whatever they do to dump it or clean it or whatever. Unfortunately, you also have some, I call them wildcat frackers, that are just out there to make that penny, and they don't really care about nature. And so they will literally rob the water that's in the area, use it to be forced down into the ground to get into the oil and gas pockets that they're searching for. And rather than reclaim and sucking that water back up out of earth, they release it back into earth, so that it then contaminates all the water and the groundwater that's in the area. just polluting the springs. We've had a couple instances of that happening in some of the outlying areas in Oklahoma, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up. Whereas California used to be the earthquake capital of the world, thanks to fracking, Oklahoma is now the capital of in the United States. They have many more earthquakes than we do.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's an unusual thing. And look, I'm not a fool. I mean, I may play one every now and then, but I'm not a fool. I understand that these companies obviously target areas where people are in need of money, where
Yes.
poverty may be at a lower rate than, or a higher rate than in some other places. So they're not going to go into New York City and frack in New York City, because and they're not going to do it here in Los Angeles, but they're going to do it where people are really desperate for money to be able to put food on the table. And of course, it's yet another corporate crime. I could get started on this, about how we take from those that are already needy and just make them even more needy. I mean, if you ruin someone's spring water, there's no going back. I mean, it doesn't just heal itself.
There's no healing it, absolutely. And it's not only just preying on the poor who will let you do it, but it's also preying on the ones that are so poor they can't fight you if you do it. You have to have money to fight someone in court. Indian land, it falls into a very strange area where you have local law enforcement has no power on Indian land. A lot of tribes don't have tribal police, or if they do have tribal police, they're one officer is managing 200 or 300 miles of land. So you don't have much representation. You're really taking advantage of the poorest of the poor in every manner possible, ripping their livelihood. Most of the people I know in Oklahoma farm. That's how they make a living. And if you're destroying the water, there goes all their crops. There goes their livelihood, not just for a year, but like you said.
Yes. And you also can't raise animals who ingest contaminated water, because it will kill them eventually.
Yeah.
Or change their DNA enough they're not usable for what you're growing them for.
Yeah.
Or raising them for.
Yeah, it's an ugly thing that we're doing. And unfortunately doing more of coming.
And there are times where in my naivete, I don't understand what we're really getting out of it in the long run. I mean, obviously, if we need oil and gas, there is that. But I mean, we seem to manage to get it from all over the world at our own, but yet what we try to do here, we do it with such horrible consequences.
Yeah, it's greed.
Yeah, it is greed. I remember years and years ago, Duke Energy dumped a lot of contaminated water into this large river in North Carolina. It killed all of the fish. It killed all of the livelihood on that river. And yet the people who worked for Duke Energy, the average everyday person like you and I, they were completely angry when the EPA came in trying to, put a clamp down on Duke Energy, because they were like, well, this is who employs us. But I'm like, yes, but if you're eating contaminated fish or drinking contaminated water, what's going to happen when you get cancer? They're not going to help you. No one's going to help you.
And that's you could see that through America's history, where corporations have poisoned the people in and around them. A little bit off, but Flint, Michigan, oh my gosh, how that happened and how that can still be going on.
Jackson, Mississippi, same thing. I'm like, come on, people, this is not that hard to figure out, but yet corporate greed and corrupt politicians let it happen repeatedly.
Exactly. And you're right. The poor pay the highest prices in groceries and gas, everything. They don't have the means of going outward and getting the best deals possible.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a little comparison. I'm going to set this up before I make the comparison. So I'm supposed to say, I don't usually compare characters, but here we go anyway. Because I think, everything that comes before the but is a lie or something manufactured. But there is something about Mud that reminds me of Miss Marple. Oh. And in that, they're very different, but Mud has a bit of an intuition that you as an author don't fool the reader with her intuition. We get to see it unravel as she figures out the whodunit part. But Mud understands her people, and she understands her ancestors and where she's been, what she's done differently than they've done. But it's so organic in the fact that Mud can figure these things out because of who she is, not because of who someone else is. Does that make sense?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can see that. And you're right. I had never thought about comparing her to Miss Marple, but you're right. She knows her people, and it's because of who she is that she can. You've told me something about myself.
Well, and, I will say to a little bit of my defense, I've asked authors, so I see on the back of your book, you're compared to this author and this author. Does that please you? Sometimes they say yes. Sometimes they say, I might have chosen someone else. So I think it's always, for me, I try not to be too comparative, because I think the chances are I might see it differently than the author does. But I just feel as if Mud has a grasp on her reality,
Yeah.
which is really good, because we do, as you the author and Mud as the protagonist, develop how this happens. We get to see her natural intuitiveness, and because she listens to nature and she remembers the teachings of her ancestors, we get to take a ride with her as she uses her own abilities to discover what goes on. And that's always, you want your protagonist to be the hero of the story. That's why they're the protagonist.
Absolutely. Or the villain sometimes.
That's right, because the villain can be just as much fun. So
yes. I love your analogy, though I have to admit that, the author in competition with Agatha Christie is the one that I absolutely loved through childhood, is Phoebe Atwood Taylor. She's the America Agatha Christie. She wrote during the 30s and 40s. And now that you've mentioned the comparison to Miss Marple, I can kind of see Ozzie Mayhew was one of her main characters, and he solved his crimes on the Cape Cod because he knew his people.
Yes.
And I feel like she's probably the biggest author that influences my writing.
I love that.
I can see that. Thank you for pointing it out.
Yes, my pleasure. So I grew up as a child with rose-colored glasses. I really thought the world was the most special, wonderful, loving, kind reality on earth. And boy, have I been fooled in my life.
I don't know. You're still smiling through the world. I love your smile. I think you've got such great positive energy.
I try really hard. I do. I try to realize where my lane is and to try to build up other people. I don't always succeed. I freely admit that. But I think that every chance we get to be kind is a step forward for humanity. Because as I said earlier, this world can be an ugly place for sure.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And there is really only one thing that we have control over, and that's our happiness.
Absolutely. And as I like to say, if it ain't working for you here, go somewhere else,
Absolutely.
or my favorite, bloom where you're planted. I mean, I think that is such a beautiful sentiment, because, I am where I am. So I've got to bloom every chance I can, or else, somebody else is winning.
You're talking a lot about what I try to start shifting Mud towards in Silent Are the Dead is good medicine.
Yes.
The fact that the more good energy, the happier you are in your work, in your life, that's good energy that goes out into the world, and it makes the world a better place. I think I'm trying to focus a little bit more of the importance of inner happiness to spread happiness.
And I love that. That's why I'm here for it, seriously, because, you give us something positive. Mud is not out to change the world. Mud, especially in this book, is only out to change her mind and to find her happiness and to make a difference. And those sound like simple things that a lot more people should try.
I agree.
So are you working on book 3?
Actually, I finished book 3. Publisher has it. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that they say, yes, let's go forward. So I'm actually I'm writing book 4 right now. So regardless, I'm getting 3 and 4 done. I
Good,
see
good.
a future for Mud on even a book 5. The first are the 4 days of a vision quest that sets her to be the person she should be. She needs to live to her potential. So book 5 and beyond is her living to her potential and
I
being
love it. I love it. I'm here for it, Donna. Hurry up.
Thank you, Dan.
No pressure whatsoever. So do you have a website or a social media you'd like to share?
Yeah, I do have a website. It's www.rowell.com. So the website probably is the best place. I also have Facebook, which I have to admit, that's one of my goals this year is I'm going to get better about social media. I don't post as often as I should, but I do post on Facebook as well, just under DM Rowell.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Again, the book is Silent Are the Dead. It's so absolutely delicious. Thank you for being here with me again.
Oh, I love it. I love my time with you, Dan. I can't wait to visit in person.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.